What about inflammation?
Inflammation.
In the brain?
This is a very important question, and this is a knowledgeable person asking. So inflammation is really part of Alzheimer's disease. That's absolutely clear. And attacking inflammation is a therapeutic opportunity. It's an important target. People have looked at non-steroidal anti-inflammatories. The epidemiology on people who take non-steroidal anti-inflammatories is that they have less chance of Alzheimer's disease as well. The biomarkers in the blood, if you look at a profile of proteins in the blood, the ones that associate with Alzheimer's disease, the majority of them are inflammatory biomarkers. C-reactive protein is one example. So I think that, and if you look at the brain, the microglia, which are the macrophages of the brain, which are inflammatory pathway cells, are activated in Alzheimer's disease. It's not only in Alzheimer's, but in other diseases, degenerative brain disease, inflammation plays a crucial role.
With amyloid, elsewhere in the blood,
in the body.
heart, usually associated with a chronic inflammatory disease like chronic osteomyelitis.
Right.
And you get a heart that looks like a hot water bottle, completely overrun with amyloid, but it's inflammation.
Inflammation, right. So what he's saying is that there's not only one amyloid. Amyloid in the brain, which is made by the protein amyloid beta protein, but there are many other diseases where proteins, different proteins, are deposited in the brain in the same shape, what we call beta-pleated sheets. When you look under the microscope, you see them in this shape. And so amyloid can be in the heart from another disease, or it can be in the tongue, it can be in the muscle. And those proteins, when they're deposited elsewhere, cause an inflammatory process as well.
If a serotonin reuptake inhibitor is used, and theoretically there's neurogenesis in the hippocampus, has it been studied at all for Alzheimer's?
Serotonin reuptake inhibitors like antidepressants.
That's correct. For example, Prozac.
Prozac or Lexapro. Yeah. So there's a lovely article summarizing the factors that shrink the hippocampus and the factors that increase the hippocampus. Perhaps I'll give you that article. Depression is one of the factors that decreases the hippocampal volume. So here, the question is, then what about using an antidepressant like Prozac, which is effective to increase the hippocampal volume? And so treating depression has, first of all, it's a lot of people in the early stages of the dementia very commonly have depression. They realize that there's a problem. And so treating that is actually helpful symptomatically. And you can say theoretically may actually be helpful from a pathogenesis point of view because of this effect on the hippocampus. We don't think it really has a strong effect on the pathogenesis, on the amyloid, inflammatory tau pathways, if you like. But it might actually be a good thing for the hippocampus, healthy for the hippocampus.
Can you just address, please, the visual complications from Alzheimer's?
The visual complication. So 6% of Alzheimer patients present with visual problems. They go to see their eye doctor and they say, I can't see very well. And the eye doctor says, but your eyes are fine, you've got 20/20 vision. But if they take it one step further, their brain is not fine because the tau is being deposited in the visual areas, primary and secondary visual areas. And they have what's called posterior cortical atrophy. So the entity called posterior cortical atrophy, which is the vast majority of them are Alzheimer's disease. And what is interesting is that the hippocampus is spared. So their memory is quite good. So people are misled. Their memory is good, they can't be Alzheimer's. But their vision's bad. But we now know that that's a variant of Alzheimer's disease. There are 3 different pathologies, at least, of Alzheimer's disease. There's one that's the typical one, the memory problem that you and I see so commonly. There's the hippocampal sparing ones. And there the people have focal problems, visual problems, language problems, motor problems, but their hippocampus is spared. That's actually 6%. And then there's another one, limbic Alzheimer's, where it just affects memory and doesn't affect the cortex. So they just have a bad memory. They're 85, they're usually older. They're 85 and they go on for 10 years with a bad memory. And that doesn't affect their language, it doesn't affect their visuospatial, they just seem to hover along. So that's the limbic variant, the hippocampal sparing variant, and the typical Alzheimer's. Those are the 3 pathological variants, and you need to recognize them. The hippocampal sparing are early onset, rapidly progressive diseases. The limbic are late onset, slow diseases. The typical is typical memory problems that you and I see commonly.
Sir, did you mention motor problems?
Yes.
Would a rapid deterioration in stamina or ability to walk for any distance, like from me to you, be an indication of it getting worse or?
No. So motor is a rare problem. It's a very rare, less than 1% that it affects primary motor areas. When people have motor problems, we have to think of other things. One of the things we think about is a thing called normal pressure hydrocephalus, where the main problem is more a walking problem than a memory problem. They have subtle memory problems, mild, but their big problem is walking. And their hands work and their face works. They don't have Parkinson's. So Parkinson's, their face and hands are affected. But if their legs are affected, and so they're walking, and the difficulty is turning. So this is turning. For normal pressure hydrocephalus, takes 10 steps to turn 180 degrees. If you see that, that might be treatable with a shunt, because they might have water in the brain that's causing that problem. So if the legs are affected, if it's upside down Parkinson's, face and arms seem animated, but the legs are bad, think about the possibility of normal pressure hydrocephalus.
So explain Lewy body to me then. Lewy body dementia, does that not affect the walking?
Yes. Lewy body dementia, so Lewy body is the second most common degenerative dementia, very important dementia. So what is Lewy body? Lewy bodies are what Dr. Lewy described in about the same time as Alzheimer. Actually, Alzheimer described it for him. It's a protein called synuclein that's deposited in certain parts of the brain. And the parts of the brain that Lewy body, the synuclein is deposited, is in the midbrain where the substantia nigra are, where the dopamine cells are. So it causes Parkinson's disease or Parkinsonism, not Parkinson's disease. So it causes Parkinsonism. So people have Parkinsonism with Lewy bodies, and they can't walk. But as I just mentioned, not only can't they walk, their face is flat, they don't blink, their voice is softer, and they don't move their hands, and they may have a tremor, and their handwriting is smaller, as opposed to hydrocephalus, where the face and hands are okay. And in Lewy body disease, the other key cardinal features, not only Parkinsonism, but visual hallucinations. They see children, they see people. Also, they act out their dreams at night. It's more common in men, And the spouse won't tell you that he hit me while he was asleep. He's acting out, he's been chased. Won't even mention that to you. You've got to ask that question. They're acting out their dreams at night, they have Parkinsonism, they have visual hallucinations. And they respond very nicely to symptomatic treatment. So it's important to diagnose that.